warm welcome Dr. Prashant from IHMR Delhi. I'm Nikita Sabharwal and I am an Associate Dean Training and Associate Professor with Hospital Administration. And I have with me Dean Academics, Dr. Pradeep Panda, and
Hello.
Associate Dean
Hello, sir.
Academics, Ms. Divya Agarwal. And it's been a real pleasure to have you here. And so just a little brief introduction, and I will ask all the students to please take maximum advantage of this session, because to have such a senior person talking to you is a very, very good opportunity for all of you to learn, especially during these times when everybody, in fact, the hospitals are so much under pressure of streamlining the new systems, processes, and things like that. So he has taken time out, so taken advantage. And I would also ask to please keep yourself in mute, but keep the videos on. It's good to see faces while the person is talking instead of looking at a black screen or some names. So please switch on your videos and make it a most interactive session. Yes, that's better. I can see some faces now. Yeah. So just to give you a little brief introduction about Dr. Prashant Kumar Chauhan, he is the Director of Operations with Center of Sight and has an extensive and diverse experience for over 20 years in hospital administration and in the industry. He's a graduate from PGMIS Rohtak and then subsequently did his MBA. His past year includes working with Vice President Operations with International Oncology Services, and launching Center of Vein Restoration USA into India with daycare centers for treating chronic venous insufficiency, and heading 10 eye care hospitals as an associate vice president, working for Vasan Hospital also. So he's a specialized in eye care that I can see. And sir, we have a certain association. I will come to you when I do your little brief introduction. So he's worked with the Apollo hospitals also, where as the first JCI accredited hospital and chief operating officer for Arabian Health in UAE, and regional head of operations for Healthcare Global Enterprises. So also worked in Army as it's an honor to have him here as a medical officer for 5 years, and headed a 100-bedded eye hospital in Noida, that is Eye Care Hospital and Postgraduate Institute. He's also an adjunct professor with Chitkara University. So that's a very extensive experience, I must say, and we taken advantage. So, sir, there are certain common points that I just realized that I was a JCI coordinator for Apollo Hospitals in 2002. Yeah,
Great.
and I was just reading it out. So I was working with this Commander Bali was there at the oncology center.
He took over from me, correct. I handed over
Okay.
international oncology to him.
I was reporting to Dr. Rajan Ghatyog at Fortis.
Okay. He was the CEO there at international oncology.
Yes. So Dr. Rajan was there. So, students, what I'm trying to tell you is that the healthcare industry is so compact and small that we come across and meet people who has worked with you previously in the same organization. So then you share your learnings. So I knew about Dr. Prashant, but I didn't know that we have had common connections like that. So it's an honor to have you, sir. And over to you. Dr. Panda, would you like to say anything, sir?
No, already you have given a comprehensive introduction, and earlier also I had gone through his marvelous CV, wide experience, and he can start. Welcome.
Right. Welcome,
so you can see my slides, I suppose?
Yes, we can see.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Great. So first of all, thanks a ton for inviting me. It would have been lovelier if we could do it face to face, but not in our hands. In COVID times, we have to do it virtually. So I am not here to impart much, but I am also here to learn, because I think for me, the best part about being in such interactions is to being amongst young minds. And, the young minds are the ones who not just are ready to learn, but are also with their intrigue and curiosity share things which you also learn. So I'm going to go back enriched when I leave from this forum, and I'm not going to read from the books or any principles that you read, because that's all you're going to do in your MBA curriculum. today I'm here to talk about, from my pages of 20 years of experience as conveyed in diverse organizations. And what I realized in these 20 years that I could sum it up in kind of 6 mantras or 6 principles, and I would love to share them with you. And as you begin your journey, if you can keep these 6 in mind, I'm sure you will do well for yourself, for your organization, and leave a legacy behind. So what are those 6 mantras? So, and they are actually in that order of how important they are. So the first one is obviously the purpose. Second is integrity. Third is leading from the front. Fourth is empathy. Fifth is, of course, communication. And sixth is change and innovation. So let me start with the very first one. And you must have heard and read across places that, it's a very good habit to read books. And I would want to encourage you that all the great CEOs across the world read at least one book a week. So that's almost 50 plus books in a year. So I will be leaving you behind with the 2 book recommendations. And my first mantra actually starts with a book. This is the book which I hold dearest to my heart, and something which has always inspired me, and written by the great motivator. I think all of you must have heard of Simon Sinek. You must have seen his TED Talks, and his book Start With Why. And as you begin your journey after your MBA, you also need to find out, it's not just the organizations who need to know their whys or their purpose. It's you also. Why you are doing it is something that you need to figure out. I'll start with my own personal why. When we say that individuals should know their whys, that I had physics, chemistry, maths, and bio in school, and I was very interested to do aerospace engineering and go to the US and then probably join the NASA. I cracked the Boston college exam, and I was supposed to join in, and my mother kind of emotionally blackmailed me to stay back in India. So suddenly I was left without a why. I didn't know what to do, because I was wanting to do that not in India but abroad, but and I'm now not having anything. But because I had biology and my sister was in her 3rd year MBBS, I was also giving the medicine entrance exams. I joined the MBBS at Rohtak. Now the problem was that I was in my college days almost lifeless and listless, because that was not something I was looking forward to. So when I came out of my MBBS and I joined the army, I was wondering, what am I doing with my life? That's something that I felt, that I was kind of out of place doing medicine. But the wonderful thing happened. I found my why in the army. And how did it happen is that when I was in the army, you also do a lot of administrative appointments. You not just see patients, you also do a lot of administrative appointments. And I found that those assignments were very fulfilling. Interacting with people, solving problems, strategizing, doing things. And I told myself, this is it. I'm going to come out of my army. I'm going to do my MBA, and I will dedicate the rest of my life in healthcare management. So sometimes you stumble upon your why, even when you're not searching for it. But finding it is extremely important. So I hope all of you sitting in this course and attending this webinar, for all of you, your why is in healthcare management, in hospital management. That is very, very important. Now, if you look at the golden circle, this was elicited by Simon Sinek in his book. Every organization knows what they are doing. Obviously, they know that they are either making a product or they're selling a service or selling an experience. So that's a given. Everybody knows it. So the question doesn't come there. Most of the organizations know how they're doing it. So they know what is their USP, what differentiates them from the others. Trust me, not everybody knows it. Some, or I'll say in some cases, most know how they are doing it. Where the trick and the challenge comes? Very few organizations know why they are doing it. Now, what happens is, it is in the founding fathers of organizations where it lies in to make that why crystal clear. Why are you in that business? And if you are clear about the why, the how and the what will follow, and you will have people joining you with the passion, joining you with the energy and the focus and delivering, because you are clear with your why, and only people who are aligned to that why will join you. So it is extremely important as an individual, as a team, as an organization, to know your purpose. Why are you in that? And that is the reason why I say that don't start anything without clarifying this. The second book recommendation I would like to give is the wonderful book on Ikigai. Some of the Japanese concepts, I really admire them, Kaizen or Kintsugi and Ikigai. They are very, very, deep rooted and have a lot of value. And if you go into that now, Ikigai is such a wonderful, concept in basically finding the reason for being. Why do you exist? And if you look at this, this pie chart, and you will find out there's this conflicts of what the world needs, what you're good at, what you love, and what you can be paid for. Where all these four meet is where your ikigai or your purpose is. So if you are just doing what you love and what the world needs, then it's a mission. If you are doing what you're good at and you love, then it's passion. You'll be very passionate about it. And if you can be paid for it and you're good at it, it's your profession. But finding the right mix in things where all four meet together is where the ikigai lies in. So if you look at on the left side, you talk about, if your passion meets others' needs, is where your purpose is. So all of you, now, when you finish your MBA, trust me, hospital or healthcare administration is a vast field. You may have to find out whether you want to go into health administration, whether you want to go into the tech space, where a lot of things are happening nowadays, or you want to move into a hospital. Even within the hospital, whether you want to work in a multi-speciality or in a single specialty. That clarity of thought is extremely important. And please figure that out before you choose the place that you want to. And when you choose the place where the purpose of that place meets your purpose. If there is sync in that, you will be happy, your passion will be alive, and you will give your 100%. But if you join a place which is not in sync with your purpose, suppose you are a very ethical person and you join a brand or an organization which doesn't stand for it, do you think you'll be happy? No. You'll forever go back home and say, what am I doing here? My value system is getting, uprooted every day. I'm feeling, out of place. So your value system, your purpose needs to be in sync with the organization or the place that you are working in. And trust me, a why can change the world. The question which was asked by Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein has changed the way we look at science today. So it is the inquisitiveness of, finding out or having that curiosity why you are there is something which is extremely important. And that is embodied in the vision and mission statements of organizations. After all, what is a vision statement? What is a mission statement? It is basically, it shows why that organization is in that business. And you have to be inspired by that. If you look up to that organization's vision statement and says, this is something I will be proud of, then you know you are going for the right place. So you have sorted out your purpose, you've got your why. So that's great, the beginning of the journey. Now, when you enter that organization, the first and foremost thing that you need to enter with is almost like, it's like on a long journey, there's the first bus stop, you picked up your why, you're happy, or you move to the next stop. The next stop is where you pick up integrity. Don't forget to leave that. Your life is going to be a big mess if you leave without integrity. Now, integrity, by the way, is one of the core values of Center for Sight amongst efficiency, precision, and compassion. Now, I do a lot of trainings at my organization. So when I am talking about the core values, people ask me, how do you describe integrity? So I'm going to use a page from that training which I do is, it's very simple for me. It's not a bookish, definition, but the definition for me in integrity is do work in such a way that when you go back home at night, you get sleep of peace. If you don't get peaceful sleep and your conscience is pricking you because you did something which was not upholding the integrity, then something is wrong. And if you keep on having those sleepless nights, then it means there's trouble. And never allow that integrity, which is watching over you, to either go off to sleep or die down, because that is your moral compass. The moral compass has to guide you, that will not allow you to doing things. And trust me, if you look at from an integrity point of view, and it is not just what you know, it also is what you say and what you do. Everything has to be. And trust me, what is happening to healthcare, and all of us are aware, is that the nobility of the profession has gone out of the window. We don't look at healthcare with that same eyes which we looked at 30 years ago. 30 years ago, doctor was God. Now you see how doctors are being treated on social media and on television channels, where people are beating them up, doctors are getting shot, doctors are getting robbed, hospitals are being broken. Why? Because there's a lot of anger. And some black sheep in our family have also made that even worse. That people are looking at, I wrote something on LinkedIn a few days back about, profiting versus profiteering. So we are in a business where we are there for profiting, but let us not be in the business for profiteering. Then you are misusing, you are overcharging the patients, you are over investigating, you are keeping them in hospital for longer than they need, and people will lose trust in you. So you, as the custodian of the management key in an organization, has to lead from the front and have integrity first, and then expect others to have. So I'll give you a very small example about integrity. I had joined Center for Sight in 2016. And, it was just a month that I had joined, and I suddenly got a call that from one of our centers, there was some issue of some money being, missing. So me and my regional head went to that center, and we investigated, and we found that there was a front office executive who had collected 200 rupees from a CHHS patient, had shown the patient to be free and kept the money with herself. Now, I had just joined the organization, and this is something which is like, not one strike, two strike. This is basically all three strikes and out. So that person had to be asked to leave from the organization on that day and at that minute, and was, and why it was done is because you need to set an example that such things are not pardonable. Such things are never going to be accepted. And imagine a person losing a job over 200 rupees because that person breached the ideal or the principle of integrity. So nowadays, when everybody is looking at us with questionable eyes, we need to uphold that ideal, that value of having integrity, so that we can win back the trust and confidence of our patients, which we have lost. And we have lost it because of years of us trying to probably profiteer more than profit. And it can be won back, but it won't be won back by one person. All of us have to do that. So if we are able to do that and uphold, we would be able to, do justice to the profession, and the nobility and the sheen of that profession will come back. Now, if you look at why is integrity important? And by the way, integrity is important when we are doing things right, even without the watchful eyes of the CCTV. Trust me, what happens is a natural thing. If we are under the watchful eye of the CCTV, we'll say, oh, we have to do everything right. No, as mentioned in this quote, it's about even doing it when nobody is watching. That is the truest sense. And if you have integrity, what will happen is there will be increased reportings. There will be whistleblower policy. People will talk about it. There'll be lesser misconduct. People will be engaged. Productivity will be higher. So integrity has a lot of offset values which comes out of it, which we don't realize, but we need to uphold that. And as management leaders, we need to ensure that everybody else also toes the line. All of you have heard about Warren Buffett, one of the foremost investors who owns Berkshire Hathaway, one of the richest men in the world. And if you look at, when he says we are looking at 3 people if he wants to hire, or, he wants to get into an organization, and he talks about intelligence and he talks about energy, but he says, if the person doesn't have integrity, I'm not even looking at the other 2, which means this is the non-negotiable. All your high energy and your intelligence is of no value if you do not have integrity. So please remember that once you have sorted out your purpose, this is something that should be by your side till the last day on this earth. So we come to the third part. Now, the third part we talk about is lead by example, or lead from the front. So I will, all of you look at this photograph. Where do you think is the leader? Anybody can, reach out and say, if you want, please unmute yourself and tell me in this photograph, according to you, who is the leader?
Sir,
So the one in the
Shweta
in
here,
the
one
last.
in the, yeah,
One in the front.
One
the
in the
one
front. Perfect.
The one in the last.
Perfect.
sir,
Okay. So I have got the answer. I'll tell you why the person leading the front is the leader, because the leader always leads by example. So one way is very simple, is that I will sit at the back, watch everybody else working, and once the job is done, I will come and pat everybody on the back and say, wow, great job done. A true leader, with the essence of leadership in the DNA, will always lead from the front, lead by example. I'll give you a small example. When I was in Vasan Eye Care and they were launching eye hospitals in North India, so they were primarily a South Indian brand. So when they came here, they had this custom in which the staff were also positioned at the entrance, where they would welcome the patients and then help them and guide them to the reception. So a lot of the staff were unwilling to do that. They said, no, this is not something we are comfortable doing. So I remember my director, Mr. Sudhir, he came to our first hospital in Delhi. It was in Pusa Road. And when he saw this, he was very disturbed. So he came and he stood at the entrance. For about an hour, he was there himself as the director, and he was welcoming patients, and personally, he was guiding them to the reception. So what happened with that? All the reservations of the people who didn't want to do that, it disappeared. And all of them said, we will do it. So what happened? By leading from the front, he created that image, and everybody followed suit. So I remember I was in the army and I was posted in Kashmir. So we used to have that line of control fencing done. So you had to, as officers and leaders, had to go and see if the fencing is all okay in the snow, because it used to get damaged because of extensive snow. So we had a brigade commander who, he said, I will do it myself. So 500 kilometers of the LOC fencing in over weeks, he did it himself. He went on the ground, walked along with the JCOs and saw it for himself and came back. And that same brigade commander a few years later became the chief of army staff. So when he became the chief of army staff, I knew why he had become. He was not somebody who was working out of an office or out of a cushy cabin and writing orders and passing orders. No, he was doing it from the front with the people. So the lesson here is, no work is small. Don't say that this is beneath me. And the joy of, and I'll tell you my own example that, I am about 2 days a week, I would be in my office. The rest, I would be either visiting a hospital in Delhi or I'll be visiting a hospital outside Delhi. And the joy I get interacting with the staff and the doctors on the ground there is, the happiest day for me is when I'm not in my office, when I'm with the people. And that is where you can get to know how things are, and people will tell you what is right. People will also tell you what is wrong, and you can make course corrections. Those plans don't happen in boardrooms. No? Those plans happen when you are with the people. So never be a boss. Never be a boss. Be a leader. And trust me, most of the time that you leave organizations, you don't leave organizations because of organizations. You leave organizations because of who your boss is. So you should always remember that, be that leader who will hold everybody loyal to the organization and would not become the reason for people to say, I can't work here because I don't like. And understand one thing, respect is always commanded. You can't demand respect. It is by your actions that you will be respected. You can't say, I hold this chair, hence respect me. By your actions, people will give you that respect. You can't grab it, or you can't force people to do that. And that's why I'm saying, don't be a boss, be a leader. Communication. I can go on for hours and hours, but of course there's not too much of time. But I'll tell you why communication is important. Communication is important because the pain point in healthcare, or a pain point in any organization, or in any relationship for that matter, is either lack of communication or poor communication. So if you look at it, your academic credentials and your professional experiences don't hold too much of value as much as your communication skills. You are going for an interview. Tell me what is the first impression that they make of you? Is not your resume, is how you are communicating with them. So please understand that your communication skills are extremely important, not just of you, but also of your entire team. And be a good listener. We sometimes just hear people, we don't listen because we want to express and give our answers without understanding what the issue is. And when you come to leadership communication, it is timely communication. And I know it has to be face-to-face. Nowadays, we are communicating a lot from the virtual medium because we are forced to, but otherwise, communications through video conferences and all is not as good as you can do when you are sitting face-to-face. Knowing your team is extremely important. Know their names, know their families, know what their likes, their aspirations. If you have a team of 50, know of all the 50. If a team of 100, know of all your 100. And also have the one-to-one interactions with your team members, because they may not voice out things in front of everybody. Maybe when they do it on a one-to-one interaction, you'll know if they have any issues. Be an active listener, and very importantly, when you're wrong, admit it. It takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of swallowing your ego and pride, but do that. If you are wrong, and that is why it let the team down, please admit it that yes, we were wrong, but we will ensure that we don't do that again. So this is something I learned from the Cleveland Clinic. It is a wonderful model of teaching, the model which gave us empathy, and they also have something called the START and the HEART principles. And I give that mantra to everybody. Now, this is the mantra for interacting with anybody. Now, that interaction could be a doctor interacting with a patient, a front office executive interacting with the attendant. You need to just remember START. Why? Because you need to ensure that you are smiling and greeting the patient. You are giving your name and what your role is, and then asking them, what they need and what can be expected. Be an active listener and help them. Build that rapport. And the success of building a rapport is that if they end up giving a feedback, they give your name in that feedback. That feedback could be in a feedback form, it could be in a Facebook review or a Google review or any kind of feedback. They will say that Shweta, the front office executive, was excellent. They should remember your name. So that is the kind of rapport that you need to build with the patients. And at the end of every engagement, thank the person that they gave you the opportunity to interact. Say thank you. So this is how you do. Things will go wrong. There will be times where you will disappoint your patients. There will be because of issues of excessive waiting, or the doctor has just disappeared, or something went amiss. You need to be able to do what is called service recovery, which means you are about to lose this patient forever, but you don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to ensure that the patient is retained. Now, how will you do that? Is when you respond with HEART. So START is for interactions, HEART is for service recovery. The first and foremost step is listen actively to the entire story. Take them to a chamber. Don't do that in the private public place. And then first just patiently listen to their problem without, complaining or cribbing or, cutting them short or stopping them from doing it. Listen to the entire story. We'll talk about empathy a little later. And the toughest part, in this entire heart is the apologize. You know why? Because you will say, why should I apologize? I was not the one who made the mistake. It was my executive who did the mistake. Why should I say sorry? You are saying sorry on behalf of the organization. So hence, apologize to them that we let you down. You came with certain expectations, but we didn't deliver to those expectations. We are extremely sorry. And then respond. The response is, it could be by a course correction. It could be by something that they didn't get. You give it to them. That it can't be without any actionable. Till an action is done, they will not feel satisfied. And again, which was common to start comes in heart, is say thank you. Why thank you? Because they gave you an opportunity to make amends. So once you've apologized, please do at the end thank them. So we talk about the RCA and the CAPAs, which you all study. Ensure if such a action has happened, it doesn't repeat. Because if the same patient comes in 3 weeks later and faces the same trouble, we'll say, you guys never learned a lesson. So very, very important that they don't repeat the mistake. So I was saying that, the heart principle had the empathy, and empathy is something which is extremely important. And I think if you have not seen, please go and see the empathy video of Cleveland Clinic. I have used it a million times in my training sessions, and something that you should watch. And it just gives me goosebumps every time I watch it. And sadly about empathy is that it is never taught in any books. Like I was doing my MBBS, as doctors, we are supposed to be empathetic, but we weren't taught empathy in our medical curriculum. Nobody talked about empathy. But we are suddenly expected to be empathetic, so, which again is demanding a bit too much. You never talked about the importance of it, but then you are expected to be empathetic. So I'm telling you, empathy, without empathy in healthcare, you will always be a failure. It's about, understanding what that person is feeling. It's like literally walking in their shoes. So if a patient comes in and is facing the trouble of waiting for 2 hours, it's like you should understand what you will go through if you have to wait for those 2 hours. And trust me, another mistake that we do, we mistake empathy to be sympathy, but it is not. Please don't be sympathetic, be empathetic. Don't try to say, I understand your problem. No, I have experienced it myself. I know what you're going through. Hence, you are emoting it. That emotion is touching a raw nerve in your system, and you are ensuring that that person doesn't go through that. So sympathy is like condolences. Oh, I'm so sorry for you. No. So I'll give you a small example. I use that in my sessions about empathy. I'll give an example from my own personal life. So I was in college in the year 1996. I was in Rohtak. And I got this sad news that my father had passed away in his sleep. He had just retired from the army and he was settled in Meerut. And I got the news that he just passed away, and I rushed back to Meerut. And as you know, that when such things happen, you get family members and relatives and neighbors and all come and, they pay their condolences and they say, oh, this is, very sad. And I had suddenly become the male member of the family, and people were expecting a lot from me. This was 24 years back. So I don't remember much about who I had met and what was said. But one memory is very clear in my mind still today, that it was about 2 o'clock in the night. I was sitting on my kitchen sink, and there was a dear friend of mine from school who was my best friend in school in St. Mary's. And he was talking to me, and he was somebody who lost his father 2 years back in a road traffic accident. And he again was the only male member in his family. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, I understand what you're going through. It's going to be very, very tough. It's not going to be easy. The first 6 months will be hell, but just pull through it. You will make it. And that conversation 24 years ago was the strength which I needed to be able to come out of it stronger. You know why I don't remember any other interaction? Because everybody else was giving me sympathy. It was only that friend of mine who was giving me empathy. And that is why I remembered it. And that is why we say that you have to be not sympathetic, you need to be empathetic. How do you practice empathy? There is a cheat code, by the way. So I'm going to share that cheat code with you. How do you practice empathy? Because we've talked about the theory part of it. We need to practice it also. So in empathy, you have to remember it's all about eye contact. You cannot be empathetic without looking the person in the eye, because you need to show that concern that you really care. You know, your facial expressions have to be read. If that person is feeling sad, that expression will be there, and you can't be smiling and laughing at that time. You know, your posture has to be something which has to be attentive. You need to also see if the person is drooping, you need to hold that person. So have an eye on the posture, your affect or emotion, tone of voice. The other person's voice is breaking, it means that person needs comfort, needs support. So attentive to that. You know, hearing the whole person. We talked about it in communication. This is something which comes again. You listen to that person, find out why and what went wrong. And end of the day, everything needs a response. That will be like, yes, we will be there. We'll take care of you. You know, everything will be all right. You know, we had a relative of mine had gone through the same thing. They came out of it, no issues at all. I have seen a cataract surgery happen in the OT. I've seen it myself. It takes 10 minutes, no pain. Don't worry, auntie, you'll be all fine. Because you're talking about from your own personal experiences, it gives confidence to them that everything will be okay. So this is the code for you to remember empathy and hold it in every interaction that you have with every staff of yours, every doctor of yours, and every patient of yours. Because empathy is for not just external customers, empathy is also for internal customers. And you know what is the end point beyond empathy? When you start doing something about it, that's called compassion. So that's one step even beyond empathy. And please, people are not looking for pity. People are not looking for sympathy. People are looking for empathy and compassion. So have that. And if you are in healthcare, you are there because you want to do good. You want to get people rid of their misery, of their pain, suffering. And that will only come when you're willing to do something about it. And that is the spirit with which you should engage with your patients. Now, something which is extremely, extremely important is to be ready for change and innovation. Now, what happened was that people are finding change to be very troublesome. People are very hesitant to change. People are very resistant to change because they find being in the comfort zone the best place to be. No. You need to make radical changes. Now, I'll give you an example of Apple. Everybody knows about the brand Apple, which recently became the $2 trillion company with a market cap nobody else has ever done. They do not feed into demands. Apple doesn't look at a demand and feed it. Apple creates demands. Look at the innovation that they do. They were the ones who created the demand by doing what? Creating an iPod, and they created a demand for a music player. They brought in the iPhone, created the entire smartphone market. They brought in an iPad, and the tablet generation boomed. Or they got the Apple Watch, and they're looking at many more innovations and changes in the future. That's how you need to be. Think different. That's what was the tagline of one of the Apple commercials. And in healthcare, if you look at it currently, what has happened with the COVID pandemic? Everybody knows people don't want to come to hospitals. Suddenly, every healthcare provider is jumping on the bandwagon of telemedicine and on home care and all, because that's the way to be. They weren't doing it 4 or 5 months ago. They have been forced into a change or innovation. Please don't do that. You need to be ready for it before you are pushed into it. And you're looking at, I remember I went to CMC Vellore in my Apollo days. Now it's a trust hospital down south, very popular. And in the main lobby, there was a touchscreen kiosk which helped people guide them on to any department. Now imagine CMC Vellore having that way back in the year 2008, about 12 years back, which we are now currently figuring out. They were doing it then and there. So what they were doing is, it was a huge hospital. People found it very difficult to, navigate through the hospital. So they put a touchscreen kiosk way back then. We have AI coming into it. Robotic surgeries are happening. We are now getting into chatbots. People are literally having, virtual agents talking to you. You don't even have a real-time, call center executive working to you. Be a person who is looking out for changes. Now, processes and systems are never written in stone. Never think that any process which is valid today will remain valid for years together. It won't happen. So be ready for something called, we say, BPR, that is business process reengineering, which means keep that change within a process as times change, and you need to adapt your processes also to those. So have a knack for that, have an eye for that. And be thinking out of the box. So that's why I always admire Steve Jobs, because he thought out of the box and has taken Apple from a garage to now world's one of the most foremost, innovation changes company. And that's the person who innovates, or the organization that innovates, is the organization that will win the race. And don't fight it. It's a common habit that whenever change happens in an organization, there are many hands which will get raised and say, no, this won't work. It's not necessary. Whatever is happening right now is perfectly okay. Why we need to change? Don't do that. Be a leader of the change. Don't be a follower. This is a very interesting exercise. Just read what's on the slide and figure out where you are, or what kind of a bone you are. Are you a wishbone who always feels somebody else should do your work? Are you a jawbone who does most of the talking but very less action? Are you a knucklebone who will knock everybody out because you're very insecure? Don't be any of the three. In your life, always be the backbone. Now, it's not easy. A lot of hard work. There's a lot of burning the midnight oil, but very fulfilling. And trust me, the person who does most of the work gets given more work, because the leaders know that the person is able to deliver. So what they will do, they'll give that person more work. So please don't buckle down under it. Take that challenge and feel that, yes, that's something that I want to do, because more work that you do, you'll become better at it. And it will give you the experience when you pick up a position where you need to make other people do, because you will have an in-depth understanding. The best person to guide is somebody who has done that work. And that's why you look at so many of these business houses, when they have their children coming into the business, they bring them right from the shop floor. They don't put them in fancy offices. They'll say, no, you do the internship on the shop floor, because we want you to learn from the ground. Then only you will realize what's happening. So that's what I'm saying, that be the backbone. A wonderful opportunity in healthcare going forward. Healthcare is and always be a recession-proof industry. And if you are able to follow these principles, these mantras which I talked about, and keep them with you, you will always and always do well. And see, the thing is, the best part about it is that people should remember you when you have gone. Leave a mark. So even 10, 15 years down the line, when people talk about who were the good people, they should take your name. That's the legacy you leave behind. It's not easy, put in a lot of hard work, but it will be worthwhile. This is one of my favorite quotations. It's on my LinkedIn wall. It's on my desktop wallpaper. It is not about authority. It's all about influence. So you may try to think that, sitting in a position of a CEO, it is all about the authority that you hold in that chair, but no. How many people you can influence and how many people you can inspire to become better is what will be the value for you, that yes, you are successful. So don't run after authority. You should run after influence. And you can only influence people if you are able to inspire them by your actions, not just words. A fancy PowerPoint presentation is not going to make people say, wow, he's my leader. No, the leader is the person who they will say, he stood next to me when there was a crisis, did not say, please do something about it and tell me, and made that correction. So I will hope that you are able to imbibe these things, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. I have this daily interaction there. We could talk about case studies and experiences where we do a very engaging discussion there. So look forward to seeing you there on LinkedIn, and I would want you to be participative, not just so we have polls and things which we do when we want to know what is your thought about it, and we have a lot of engaging discussion which happen there. So this is something which I believe LinkedIn is a beautiful platform, and I learn every day. Even though I've done 20 years, but I feel that I'm still a student of life. And when you are on LinkedIn, what you achieve there are a lot of influencers. There are people who are sharing a lot of ideas and stories and thoughts, and you learn from them. And my thing is that follow the good influencers on LinkedIn and also be participative. Your thought is not something that you should be feeling afraid. Oh, I'm just an MBA student. Why should I put something wrong? No, don't hesitate. Your thought may kind of instigate a lot of discussion there, and you will find that very, very stimulating. So one parting thought would be is that utilize the networking tool of LinkedIn. And I find that it is not just for finding jobs, it is for finding new ideas, meeting new people, sharing your thoughts, as well as getting to know from other people from various industries, not just healthcare. You may certainly pick up something from, another industry. And wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. And as Nikita ma'am said, that it's a very small industry. We will bump into each other, and hope to see you doing well. And I hope that whatever has been passed on to you today, you just remember these things, because I'm telling you by experience that these things will hold you in good stead in your future forever. So thank you again for the opportunity, for having me to interact with you. Anybody has any questions or anything related to what I talked about, or anything else also? It can be out of syllabus. You may feel free to ask, and would love to share my thoughts on those. Thank you.
Right, Dr. Prashant, thank you so much. I think indeed it was just a gist of all the experience that you've had, put into this presentation. And I think each word that you said makes a lot of sense, and a guiding force for the new professionals who are coming on board, of the budding professionals. And I can relate with you. Each and everything that you said makes a lot of sense, be it ethical practice and the communication in healthcare. Definitely are the key measures that one has to learn, that traits of professionalism while you are into this industry. So absolutely rightly said. And we will just open the session for question answers. Those may have questions can actually put that into a chat box, or write a question, and I'll come one after another to let you ask your questions directly with Dr. Prashant. So any questions, anybody would like to say anything or ask? And whoever is asking the question, please tell your name and a little background, that you are, of course, that you are doing this program, but then what graduation, BDS, or what background, social sciences, whatever. So
and don't hesitate. Please feel free to ask, because this is supposed to be a two-way street, not one way.
Definitely. So please, class, go ahead and ask your questions, speak your mind off, and this is the beautiful opportunity that you've had. Who wants to go first?
Okay, fine. I'll take off.
Hello.
Yes.
Dr. Prasad.
Yes.
Hello.
Deepak, is it you?
Yes, sir. Amit Ranjan, right?
Fine. I, Dr. Prashant, I'm Colonel Manoj. I have put in about 25 years service. I'm presently on study leave and doing this course. Basically, it interested me for my second year. That's the reason I'm doing this course. As regards I think there are absolutely apt for all people, including our generation and the younger generation, who are you know very soon going to be off the mark for their new assignments. I just wanted to add on to what you have said so far, including those 6 months. Integrity forms a very important, part and parcel of the life, as well as the teamwork. Teamwork also, if you are a team member or if you are a team person, I think that is also one of the mantras to succeed in life. That is what I wanted to say. And as regards your 6 mantras were concerned, absolutely to the point. And I have learned, and I'm going to keep these 6 mantras with me when I move back to my organization, as well as when I come to the new place after I hang my uniform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And I think you very rightly pointed out, we have this habit sometimes of thinking that we can, achieve miracles alone. And they say that dreams only work when teams work. You will not be able to get your dreams to be fulfilled if you don't have teamwork, where you have that spirit of that I want to do everything alone. I don't want to rely on people. And we sometimes have that spirit of one man up ship and say that, okay, I want to be in the limelight and I want to do, and I don't want to even utilize the strengths of the team members. And if that spirit and that camaraderie is not there and people are not well in sync with each other, you will find that on paper they may be like a very very spirited team and have all the right qualifications and all, but because their teamwork wasn't good, their outcomes are not as expected. So I totally agree with you that without teamwork in place, you will never be able to achieve, because it's again, healthcare is not a one-man show. It is, even if the doctor has done a great job, but if that front office executive behaved in a poor fashion, the patient is not going to come back again. So just because the doctor will feel I did a great job, but the patient didn't come back again, because the reason was that every touch point of that patient wasn't in sync with what the patient was expecting. And nowadays, please understand one thing is that I just want to bring that point that we are no longer in a service economy. 25 years ago, we were in a service economy. Everybody's saying that we are in this service industry. Please, no, we are not in the service industry. This may be news to you, but I want to break it down to all of you. We are in something called the experience economy. We are not selling a service. We are selling an experience. So the patient is coming to you and wanting to buy an experience. Now, if that experience is not seamless at every touch point, the patient will be dissatisfied, will give you a 1-star on Google and will rant about you on Facebook and will never come back. So each and every team member needs to be fulfilling all the core ideals and the missions and the values of the organization. Then only comes out a happy, delighted patient who will go out and become your brand ambassador. That's why I understand one thing is we are selling experiences and every person needs to be on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we are, next question, anybody wants to say anything or ask?
Yeah, ma'am, can I?
Yes, Dr. Shabna, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, sir. So my question is like, if one is placed on a sensitive position and having some critical information or sensitive information of the entire organization, and the one of the officials from the organization comes and insists ki provide me that so and so information to me. So what could be the best possible way to surpass that situation?
Okay, so very interesting, and it happens, by the way. This something
Yes.
is happening because what happens is that at some point of time in your career, you will be privy to sensitive information, which could be you are forming the budgets for the next year and you got the preliminary budget, but nobody else in the organization except for the core team knows about it. And there may be somebody coming and say, please give me information about it. Now, when you are privy to a sensitive information, you are also made aware that who all are capable of knowing that information. So make one thing very clear, that when you hold such information, also obtain clarity that who else in the organization should be privy of it. So that's like a small club of people who are allowed that information. If anybody within that club or that group asks you, feel free, because that person is anyway supposed to be privy. But if anybody is not supposed to, you may say that I've been told very categorically that I can't share it beyond a certain limit, and also do inform your supervisor. What will happen otherwise is that that person may go through another channel and it may reach your supervisor, and your supervisor will say, but you never told me. So even when you are saying that you can't share, it is also your duty to also inform that you have done this. So one thing the supervisor will say, great job, you did what you were supposed to. And when it reaches the supervisor through somebody else, he or she will be able to say, I know about it, and I stand by what my colleague or my reportee did, because that was as per the norms. And understand one thing is, today information is king, information is God. You know, people are literally, if you look at what happened in the US elections, you know, people are selling information. So please be sensitive towards it, and do not misuse the power of knowing for any benefit. Because somebody may come as a competitor, may ask you for some information that, you know, can you tell us what was your achievement last month, or how much was your achievement last financial year? And if it's not supposed to be shared, please don't share it for any benefit or anything. Don't share it. And that again comes from integrity, because you were told you can't share it with somebody, and you upheld that by not getting into any temptation. And yes, whenever you do such a thing, it is also your moral responsibility to inform your supervisor about the same.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Right. Who wants to go next?
Ma'am, may I?
Yes, Aman, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. My name is Aman. I am an optometry graduate. First of all, we would like to thank you for the session and sharing all the mantras. We really enjoyed it.
Most welcome.
Sir, I have a small question. Sometimes you are in a situation when you encounter a patient or someone who do not want to listen you or is in the heat of frustration. How do you manage and communicate with those people?
Okay. So this will happen, by the way, trust me. You know, I've seen over my 20 years, you get all kinds of angry, just not willing to listen kind of patients. So first thing, please understand one thing. When a patient is angry, don't give him the attention that he's seeking, probably being in a crowd. You know, when a patient is angry, you sometimes want to start shouting then and there, because you know that there is crowd around you, and you will be on the defense, because you want to not have that patient affect others who are in that waiting lounge or in that area. So the first mantra in handling an irate patient is, please move him away from that public space into, say, a lounge or into your office or some place where only you and the patient is there. That's the first thing. Do not do anything till you have done that. And that you will do by very, politely requesting, ki ma'am, sir, please come with me. And you will see that the blood pressure, the temper of that person would have gone down 25%, because you have sucked out the oxygen of something called audience. Because there's no audience now. There's only you and the patient. Second mantra is, very patiently, even if it takes half an hour, listen to what the patient is wanting to say. Because half the time, the trouble is we're not willing to listen. We will say, this is the rule, this is the policy, you've done this. No, hear that patient out. If you are not able to solve on your own, there's another thing which you can do is, sometimes they need attention of your superior. You must have typically seen when you get a call from a call center and you're really pissed, you say, please connect me to your supervisor, because you're not happy with that person's handling. You want to connect to a supervisor. So when you are reaching that inflection point where you feel that it is beyond you, you know what you should do? So just give me 1 minute. I'll bring in my head of department. And suddenly that patient is getting that audience of a senior person. So you will have to play tag team also sometimes. And there is no, losing your ego and pride being hurt that I could not do it on my own. I had to call my HOD. As you gain experience, your dependence on your HOD will reduce. So maybe in the first year, you will call an HOD 5 times out of 10. Second year, it will become 3. And third year, you will probably call your HOD only 1 time out of 10. Because you would have learned the knack of literally finding out how to handle that patient. But first is suck out the audience, listen to him, handle the person. If not, bring in a superior and together as a tag team, solve the patient's complaint. And you will see that with all these things, you will be able to resolve their issues.
Thank you so much, sir.
Most welcome.
Right. Any other questions anybody has or wants to say?
Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
This is Shweta here. Sir, I'm an optometrist by profession.
Another optometrist, huh?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have
Okay.
a question that when you're working in an organization, right, the people who are sitting at the higher positions than you, they'll try to impose their actions or their decisions on you, that you have to take this decision. And you feel like, from inside that, no, this is wrong, I cannot do it. Like, so how can you handle that situation? Even if they're wrong and you know that they're wrong, but they want you to take their decision. So
Okay.
like,
And I have faced that myself in my career umpteen number of times, where I have been in disagreement with what my superior was wanting to impose upon. So I'll tell you what, there are two stands. One is it your personal stand that you're not liking it? Or is it because what he's trying to impose is against the stand which the organization would have taken? Just think of organization as a person. And would that organization as a person want you to do that or not? Now, if it is not, then you are first going to reason it out by giving your side of the opinion, that why. So you can't just say no, but you have to also say why.
okay.
Now, what happens is sometimes your why connects with that person and he's willing to listen to you. But trust me, there will be times where the why will not resonate with that person because he or she is going to be very adamant about it. No, it is my way or the highway. Then sadly, you are stuck with the poor boss.
Yes, sir.
Trust me. And it happens. We are at many times in our lives will be stuck with a poor boss who is just unwilling to listen. Just
Yes,
not,
sir.
and only saying is that I know I am right. Whatever you are saying is wrong. So you have only one option, is to listen. Now that there are two ways of handling it. One is that, okay, you can suppress your, the inner being that is saying no, and you do it because there's no other option. Or second is, please inform your superior and say, I need to escalate this. Have the courage to escalate it. What happens most of the times is sometimes we find the fear, oh my God, if I'll go above, I am going to have repercussions. But if it is going against your core values and you are not comfortable and you will not be wanting to do it, and that person is unwilling to listen, officially proper channel, escalate. Now, every person is not as loony or mad as maybe your boss might be. There may be people above him or her who have reason. So when you go to that person and say, see, I am just wanting to follow what the organization wants me to do, but this person doesn't want me to, I don't wish to do that, please help me. 8 to 9 cases out of 10, you will get help about. Do not follow the easy way of suppressing your value system and quietly following it by saying, I don't want. And what people then do? The third option people do is people leave that job. They get so frustrated. As I said, no, organization, you don't leave organizations, you leave bosses. So what you will do is you'll say, I can't handle this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this job. But that is running away. Running away is not the solution. You might find a similar kind of boss in your next organization. How many places would you run away from? Face it. Face with that person. If not, face with the person above. I have seen people even I was working in a company where I knew people who used to have to write emails to their CEOs who was like probably 5 or 6 levels above them, without exaggerating, without trying to vilify an individual, but just trying to say, I just want to bring a point that I am being made to do something which is against the ethos of the company. I need help. And there will be somebody in the value system who will give you that help. So be optimistic about it and ensure that it is not a personal stand. It is the stand of what the organization would have wanted you to do, is something that you don't want to move away from. That clarity is very important. Not having your personal nuances, blind you or, make you go the other way. So that is something, show that moral courage and show that from your very first job. Don't worry about your designation, your seniority, your number of years. If you are right, then you are right. Nobody can point you in the other direction. But if you're wrong, then you are wrong. At some point of time, you will be caught.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
All right. Next.
Ma'am, may I ask a question?
Yes, Niharika, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I am Dr. Niharika.
Yeah, good evening.
I am a BDS by graduation. I have a question. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the session, and I follow you religiously on LinkedIn also. And
Yeah,
today
I've
morning,
seen that.
yeah, today morning only I responded to a poll you had posted. That was a very
Yes.
interesting one. So my question is, sir, we are in such a position right now that we will not be joining at a very basic position also, and not at a very top position also. So we will be in a conflict, like whether we should like favor our juniors or should follow what the leadership of any organization talks about. So where should we keep our stand at? We have to make
Okay.
both of them happy.
It's a very difficult position to be in. Okay, you know, you're trying to have your team also motivated and happy, and you also want the people whom you report to be happy with the way you are. So you are like, you know, that the fine balance that you're trying to work upon. So the thing is, please understand one thing is, you are not in the pleasing people business. First thing, when you enter into any job, remove out of your mind that you're not here to win popularity contests. You are here to ensure that if the company has a mission, you are there to ensure that that mission gets fulfilled. You will be given a team, you will give them the task that this is what we are here for, and we will do this together. One more thing I've seen very commonly in people who join management trainees typically after MBA, and I've worked with a lot of management trainees, is that they will try to become very, very familiar with the team members. And then, you know what the team members say? That management trainee is the best. Why? Because the management trainee will never scold us. Will never say anything that when we do wrong, they'll say, okay, forget about it. You know why? It comes from that psyche of being accepted. And because you want to be accepted in an organization, you try to become over familiar and become a person that you will always play the good cop. You will at times need to also play the bad cop. So you're not here to balance about the people below or the people above. You need to be clear that you are there to fulfill the mission of the organization. If in that case is giving patients the best care, then your job will revolve and rotate around only one thing: how my team delivers the best of care. And at any point of time you see a deviation, please don't refrain from playing a bad cop. You will at point of time will have to scold your team members and say this is not done. So you will show them your good side, but show them the bad side. And if you do that, people above you will automatically say that this is the right person for the job, because you are fulfilling the mandate, because they also have a mandate from above. They should do the same thing which you are doing. So don't try to look at how you are going to balance people above and below. Just fulfill the responsibility of that department which you have been assigned to. Don't try to get over familiar. Where there is a time people are not towing the line, please tell them that they are not doing so. And if you do that, I will give you 100% times you will be able to achieve what you are in the beginning wanting to achieve. And I have seen management trainees at a very young age join in, and who have this clarity in their mind, get, you know, promoted, given bigger responsibilities and handle, rather than the ones who were trying to please people and trying to say, oh, I want to balance my team and all. Or by the way, don't try to also please the superior. The superior may change tomorrow. It is not about the person. You know, the person may, you suddenly have a very good rapport with the superior, and that person moves on to another organization and so, oh, my hard work is all gone. So please don't be person centric, be organization centric. So if I have to give it in one line, is don't be a person centric individual, be an organization centric individual. And if you do that, your troubles will go away always.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Prashant, Colonel
Yes.
Deepak here. I would
Yes,
like,
sir.
My question is not complete.
just
Okay.
one second, Niharika. I would like to
Okay,
add
sure.
to whatever you said, Dr. Prashant, that what Niharika was mentioning, I would like to add to what you said, that as an individual, as a management trainee or whatever position you are in, if your skill sets, your knowledge is such that people come to you for guidance, and you can that will stand you out anywhere from for your seniors as well as your followers, your juniors. So the one thing you should lay more stress on is enhancing your skill sets and your knowledge.
And I believe that, once your MBA is done, please don't think that the learning is done. Huh? So please, feel free to be looking at interesting courses and, seminars and, even short-term courses, whether it is in quality or in medical legal ethics and all, because when you are soaking in information from everywhere, it will hold you in good stead and will expand your horizon. So I would never lose the opportunity. If you go on LinkedIn, you have LinkedIn Learning and you have courses all around that you can pick up. And just ensure that, and read books. For me, I think one thing which I learn a lot from is ensure that at least one book a week, if you can read, that you have that kind of an appetite, trust me, you will be able to pick up nuances and lessons that you will be able to then remember and apply in your day-to-day work. So you had something else also, Niharika, tell me.
So
You
I
wanted
was
to ask
saying,
something else.
Does this rule fit to the interdepartmental conflicts also?
So that's the difficult part, because what happens is that sometimes you don't have control in what happens in other departments, because you are in a position to influence your team members and also ensure that the line above you in the reporting authority is also clear. But what happens is that you don't have any control over what happens in the other department and how they are trying to play. It could be politics for that matter. But I say that end of the day, 9 times out of 10, if you are in the right, these things will play out to your advantage finally. You may have setbacks, there will be biases which may work against you at times, but trust me, they're only in the short run. In the long run, and don't get impatient when it happens. Our first habit is we get impatient and say, that person got away with it because, maybe that person knew somebody and got away with it. That's the shortcut. Don't try shortcuts. Your shortcuts will help you maybe 1 time out of 10 or 2 times out of 10. But in the long run, you'll be labeled as a person who is growing not because of own abilities, because of the influence of others. Stand by your own self. Stand with the ideals, that is your personal ideals and the organization's ideals, and that will hold you in good stead. These things will happen. You sometimes can't control much in what is happening in the department. Put your point across most times than others, you will eventually win.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Right. Who wants to ask the next question? Dr. Prashant, is it all right if we stretch for another 15 minutes and wrap up by 5:30?
I am okay with 5:30 because I have to enter into another thing at 5:30. I am okay to stretch till 5:30. So we have about 12 minutes or so.
Yes, okay.
And please, people ask anything that comes to your mind.
Divya, you want to ask something?
Ma'am, may I?
Yeah, I would like to ask Dr. Prashant, from the students' perspective, I would like to ask that in this situation of COVID, how Center for Sight has handled their workforce with respect to the leadership?
Okay. So, first of all, we don't know how long this is lasting. Nobody in the world has the answer. I can't even find out from anywhere with the vaccine coming in January or coming in June. So there's a lot of uncertainty whether, how, things are going to pan out. I think what one most important thing in these times as management is to reassure everybody in the team, that is in the CFS family, and we have a family of 1,200 people, that organization is there for you. Okay. Right now, there's a lot of sense of insecurity and lack of safety. People are worried about their job. The first thing that they are worried about is that there will be attrition of 500 people will be thrown out because there's not much of business happening. And end of the day, you have to understand it is those people only will give you back the business. If there are no people left, then where's the business going to come from? So the first step in such pandemic situations as the management is to reassure everybody. And the best person to do it is the top man. So if you have the chairman or the managing director, that is the person who should address the entire team, whether it's in Zoom or it's an email or it's a WhatsApp video, whatever. But address them and tell first thing, you are safe. Trust me, the biggest problem will be solved. Once that person knows his job is safe, they will say, okay, I can now, and they will go out of the way. See, they are exposing themselves to literally being infected with COVID when they are on the ground, when they're treating patients. When they're doing that for you, risking their lives and their safety, we can at least, take care of their jobs and their next, paycheck. Once you have done that, the next step is to ensure that the safety protocols are clearly communicated to the team members and they are constantly checked to ensure that they are being adhered. Otherwise, what will happen is that these protocols are not being followed. You will suddenly find your people getting infected left, right, and center, and suddenly you will find half the staff of a hospital is not even, is positive or is suspect positive, and they're sitting at home. So the training becomes extremely important because they're changing protocols. You're changing the way there's a screening desk. So what you need to do is please convey to them in clarity what the protocols are, and that is not enough. Train them, retrain them, and reinforce on that constantly. So, and I'll give you a small example. We have started something called the Mission Saksham. We started a week ago. So we are sending to our operations team of 650 people a question every day. So we send it on a SurveyMonkey link. Every evening at 5 o'clock, everybody gets a question with a multiple choice, and they know it could be anything from a COVID protocol to an operational process. And now people are looking forward to it. So every day, 5 o'clock, what will be the question? And it is testing them in a very informal way, and also giving them that if they don't know the answer, they will be at least be told what the answer is. So in these current times, that is also extremely important. And empathy, that is very, very key, because people are going through tough times. Somebody may come to you and say that I may want to take a 2-month off, my family is not allowing me. You can't say no, you are fired. No, be empathetic in these times. And these are the times the organizations who do these will bounce back faster,
right?
Because when the business comes back, these people will give more than their 100% to the organization because they took care of them in bad times. And you will see these people make them sail through and achieve, I'll say overachieve the targets and expectations. So if you do these few things as an organization, I think it will go a long way.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Neha, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Hello, sir. This is Neha. I'm a BHMS graduate. And
Yeah.
my question is, sir, how to deal with wishbone people?
Okay. So I know, you have to deal with wishbones and jawbones and all kinds of knuckle bones. So the trick here is that you need to be able to inspire people to change from what they are and their basic psyche. So the thing is, you need to be an influencer. And how will you be an influencer? By showing them that what they are doing. See, first of all, don't try to beat them down. Don't try to show them, oh, you are lousy, you don't know anything. That will not make you achieve anything. You need to tell them that there is a better way of doing it. And what also happens in organizations, and I've seen which works out, is that when you make examples, positive examples of people who are the backbones, by elevating them, giving them bigger responsibilities, by showcasing their talent, what will happen? All the wishbones and the jawbones and the knuckle bones will look at it. Yet this is not taking us far. We are not achieving anything out of it, but that person is achieving it. So you will look up to that person and say, they'll come to you and say, what can I do to do that? They'll come to you. That curiosity will be there. What am I missing? I am not able to achieve half of that. Then you tell them what they are missing. So then they will be receptive. So when you create positive examples of people who are the achievers, and you promote them and you showcase them, you reward them, you recognize them in a public forum, you will have all these people also wanting a piece of that pie and say, I want that. And when you will tell them what is needed, they will give up on the things which they are currently holding on to, which they think is right. You need to dispel that. You tell them, no, what you are doing is not right. I will tell you what is right. And trust me, everybody wants to do well in life. Nobody wants to be a failure. Everybody wants to succeed. You have to tell them, to succeed, this is what is needed. Follow this and you will succeed. And you will see many of them, I'm not saying everybody, many of them will change. Who can't change are misfits in an organizations and will slowly move out. Your job is to ensure that you have the smallest percentage of misfits. It will never be zero, by the way. No organizations are perfect. It will never be. But please understand that misfit percentage should not be 20-30%. It could be 1-2%. You will be able to sail through. But when it becomes 20-30%, then you have trouble on your hand.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
So I think we can just take, if there's any question, we can take the last one before we wrap up. It's 5:25 already.
Yeah, I think we can take one for the road.
Yeah. So any last comment or question anybody wants to say quickly before we wrap up?
Can I ask another question?
Okay, go ahead, Aman.
Sir, you have been working with Center for Sight at such a big position since last 4 years. What made you stable and stay at Center for Sight? And suppose you get an opportunity to work at the same position in some big hospital that is approachable to you, what will be your response to it?
Okay. Very good. I think I have been guilty of one thing is not being very stable in my career. Let me, and I want you not to follow that part. Huh? There are some things of mine I don't want you to follow. So if somebody goes through my LinkedIn profile, will see there's been a bit of instability, but that is something that I think one learns from your own mistakes. If you don't learn, then you're a fool. So I will say the reason that I have been able to spend these kind of years is that I have always wanted to contribute something new. So we have a core operations team. There are about 6 people in that core operations team. And our mission is only one thing, is we are not here to do the same thing every day. So we keep on updating something. I have a note in my phone in which when we pick up an initiative, I write it down in that note. So currently that note has about 67 initiatives in the past 4 years. So you can understand it's almost like, every month there's an initiative coming. What that does is it gives me the enthusiasm and motivation to be able to do and stay for longer because I have something to look forward to. I am not here to just maintain. It's not the maintenance dose. I'm here to add value. And that doesn't mean to add value only in my first year. I should add value till the last day that I am in the organization. So for me, if I have to move on, it will only come when I feel that I have done everything that I could. And there's nothing more to add value to. That will bring boredom and fatigue. And then I will say I need to move to a newer pasture where I can probably add value. So it will not be something that will be attracting me. It will be my own conscience telling me that I think I've done my bit. There's nothing more I'm adding and I should probably move on.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the response, sir.
Right.
Welcome.
So I think it's time that we wrap up. Otherwise, I'm sure there are 100+ students in the and we can go on for long because it's actually it's not the theory, but it's the practical experience that is coming and that you're sharing, and it's always comes very handy and very encouraging for the students and gives them the right direction that they are going to take now as they get into the professional space. So thank you so much, Dr. Prashant, for your time, and definitely as the situation improves, we would want you to come to the campus, interact with the students at much greater length and spend some more time with them, because I'm sure they're not run out of questions as of now. There'll be lot trickling
Love
in.
to see them in person. Would love to see them all in person, and I hope that happens soon.
Absolutely, and we will share the details as we are opening soon. So I think the right person to write to you would be Dr. Panda, who's our Dean Academics, and sir will be happy to welcome you along with Divya. So they are the I'm just the moderator of the session. The big bosses are here, Dr. Panda and Divya. So who manages our academics. So you'll hear soon from them as we open up and we see things improving. Hopefully we will. So thank you so much once again. And sir, would you like to say anything? Dr.
Can
Panda?
I say something last? Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Prashant, I must say it was an incredibly brilliant lecture. I am sure all of us enjoyed, including me. Thank you so much for your valuable time and really highly appreciated. And we should be in touch. Thanks a lot.
We will surely be, sir. We surely will be, sir. Neighbors in Dwarka, sir. My office is in Dwarka, so we are technically neighbors.
Yes, yes. Most welcome.
So, yeah, absolutely. We shall see you soon at the campus. Divya, would you just say closing remarks and then we'll close the session?
Yeah, on behalf of IHMR Delhi, I would like to thank Dr. Prashant for enlightening our students on a very important issue, that is the leadership in healthcare, which many of them would be assuming the different leadership positions in different capacities in the healthcare setups or healthcare facilities. So definitely these mantras which you have shared, your experience, your wisdom with our students is going to help them and refine them into a successful leader. Thank you so much. And we are looking forward to welcome you to our campus for a personal interaction, face-to-face interaction with our students. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you,
Right.
everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
And Dr. Prashant, just a quick note before we wrap up. As you've seen, there are optometrists with their background, and there are, dentists. So, I mean, of all the 67 initiatives that you have in your notepad about taking, if you feel there's anything that our students can, contribute to, we'll be more than happy, because they are, although their modules are going on, and but then if there's anything that come across your mind where you want the young minds to come and support you, the batch will be more than happy to contribute.
We'll look forward to that. We'll look forward to that.
Sure, sir. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.